Shri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayana Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Narayanam Namaskritya Narayanam Jayam Narottaram Devam Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Dayam Udirajet.
Yeah, we're down a little bit. Okay. Where's Prana? Dion, can you find Prana? So, this topic of God or religion can be a very loaded term. As soon as people hear the word God, as soon as people hear the word religion, some feelings may arise inside. So there's two topics. If you want to ruin a party, you can bring up these two topics. What are they? One's God, what's the other one? Politics. So we're not talking about politics today, but we're talking about God and religion. So I'd like to begin and pose a question to you, and to get to know the audience a little bit better. I suggest you get into little groups, 4, 5, something like this, and take a few minutes to discuss amongst yourselves, what does the term God and what does the term religion mean to you? What does it invoke for you? There's no right or wrong answer, but what does it invoke inside of you? Because I'm sure many people here have had many different experiences with these subject matters. Take a moment to define what the term God and religion means to you. minutes. Okay, so starting to wrap up your discussion now, please. The bell's ringing. Maybe everyone can shuffle a little closer. I don't actually bite. And I did have a bit of a shower this morning, so don't smell too much. Okay, who would like to share first?
I can share for the group.
Okay.
So someone said religion.
Oh, hang on, I'll give you the mic.
Does it come through there? Oh, it comes from outside. Yeah, yeah, I see. I see the logic. There we go.
So someone said religion is rules to control people, and God is me, everything. And we also say God is nothing, but also everything. God is supporter, God is truth, and religion is confusion. God is destination, and religion is journey. And for someone, it's a bit twisted.
Thank you for sharing. Next, the mic cord's not so far.
Reach that far. That's your limit. Sorry. I'll just turn it up.
Hello. We were thinking, we were feeling that God is like the source of all creation. Everything, everywhere, everything all at once.
I feel like it can be anything that you want it to be, just for you to have faith in something, like about your life, believe in something, this can be God. Yeah.
Behind you, maybe? There's a man behind you. Do you want to share anything?
There's no right or wrong answers, so anything's welcome.
The group of people were saying each religion has like different God or prophet, but the basic or like core key has a similarity, but somehow it creates separation. From my perspective, they teach the importance of like the morality in the life, loving and kindness towards to all being all simple beings. Yeah.
could be the beginning of humans, or
I'll just unplug this when you're using it.
so a few different answers present there. Does anyone here have a strong aversion to the word God? Maybe if they did, they wouldn't be in this workshop. No?
I do. It still makes me feel uncomfortable, to be honest. I don't have a problem with Krishna, but
Thank you for your honesty, and that's what we're looking for. Because I feel, particularly for those born in a Western country, as soon as people hear this term God, it's very, very loaded. And you know, when the British, they arrived in Australia and they saw how the Aborigines were living, it was so foreign to their way of life, to their values. It was incomprehensible for him to see that the Aborigine people, they just wanted to leave the land as they found it. They didn't want to manipulate it for their own comfort. They didn't want to change it. They just wanted to work with it. They didn't want to make some nice English gardens or anything like this. They just wanted to leave it as it was. So therefore, because this was so foreign to the colonial powers, then they deemed that the Aboriginal people, they mustn't be human. They must be a different species. Or if they are human, they have a smaller brain. So then we see in many, many countries, on the pretext of religion, there can be this kind of energetics of wanting to tame the savage natives and convert them to our particular belief system. And our particular belief system is, of course, far superior. And this has gone on for some thousands of years, particularly for the last 2,000 years, very strongly. And because this has gone on in the name of religion, as soon as people hear this term God, it activates something inside. And for many who have been brought up in a Western country, whether one is religiously inclined or not, the exposure that we have had to God and religion has predominantly come, I'm generalizing a lot here, from the Judean Christian heritage, mostly Christianity in many countries. So as soon as we hear the term God, we have a particular conception that has been heavily influenced by one particular religion. Is that making sense? And so this is not an attack against any particular religion. It's just observing the state of conditioning that we have. So therefore, when we start to think about this term God, it is heavily influenced by a particular narrative of this particular entity. And even if you are a devout atheist, often one's rejection of religion or God is coming as a reaction to still one particular religion, or one or two, that have their foundation in the Judean Christian heritage. So this is a very limited perspective. You know, Richard Dawkins, he writes one book, what's it called, The God Delusion. And you know, it's actually quite a good book. If you read it, it's actually not bad. But his rebuttal of God is all on the premise of Christianity. So he's tried to refute the existence of a higher power based solely on one particular version of the Supreme Truth. So this is actually not very scientific, and it's actually very limited. And so when we're thinking about this term God, often it's something very abstract in the mind. It's maybe some higher power, or it's everything, or it's some energy that pervades everything. It's really some vague concept that we have that we've just gathered from various ideas and experiences that we've had through life. That can actually have very little to do with the actual truth, but it is simply, to be honest, it's simply our own imagination. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that all the conditioned living souls, they live in the three gunas, which means there is three energetic states here in the material world. The first one is the energy of inertia, slowness, dullness, a very, very heavy energy. And so to give some feel for this, it's like you had a late night and you wake up in the morning and you feel very dull and slow. So this is a kind of tamagun energy. And the foods in this category are deep fried foods, frozen foods, and when we take these kind of energetic propensities in life, it further cultivates that kind of energy in our own consciousness. And then the next energy is the energy of a Rajagun. And this energy of Rajagun, it is like a fire. It has a lot of dynamism. It is very active. It is very creative. It is like a comet flying through the sky. But it is not sustainable. So this Rajagun always descends down eventually into the Tamagun, into the lower energy. And then the third energy is called the energy of Sattvagun. And this is the energy of equilibrium, of clarity, of calmness. So we can see these three energies are always at play in the world, and they're like three strands on a rope, and they are always somewhat mixed together. So when we sleep at night, there's a predominance of Tamagun and we go into deep sleep. And then when we wake up in the morning, Rajagun is coming, because you would not even be able to get out of bed if there was no Rajagun, if there was no element of fire to actually make you active. And then periodically throughout the day we can sit down and have a cup of tea and get some little glimpse of Sattvagun, calmness and clarity, or we can focus on our work, and then we look at the phone and we're scrolling and Rajagun comes again. So it's only in the state of Sattvagun that we can have calmness, clarity, focus and introspection. And predominantly in society today there is a pandemic of Rajagun. The food, the lifestyle, it all cultivates this very disturbed energy, and so our mind, our entire lifestyle is very hyperactive. And when we are in this kind of energetic state, we cannot understand anything. So because the majority of the living souls, we are simply getting tossed about by these three energies, and God lives above those three energies. And so we're looking in this narrow spectrum of reality, and we cannot find a supreme consciousness there, because that supreme consciousness doesn't live in that aggregate of material nature. So another question may come, that with all the power of modern technology and the advancements in science, and we have telescopes and we can send a man to the moon. Some people don't believe that, there's a whole other discussion. With all the scientific advancement, if there really was a God, surely we would have found it by now, right? We can have 5G and we can call up our friend on the other side of the world and we can have video calls. Why can't we find this God fellow? So an interesting question comes, does science, does it affirm, or does it actually deny, disprove the existence of a higher being? What do you think? Doesn't prove?
Say again?
Everything is energy, so there's more to be discovered, is that what you're saying?
There's more to discover, we can never understand it until we have. So we're still seeking, just limited, as you say.
Yes, so currently we're limited by our by the instruments that we have at our disposal.
And also with the belief system, some people are not searching further, and others are, but don't want to search.
Yes, so we're also limited by our own belief system.
Science is very limiting, and like it creates rules that mean that you end up narrowing your field of vision.
Yes, this is very true. I actually have a really nice quote by one scientist. Take me a little bit to find that, but essentially science is the language of mathematics, and it is a discussion of measurable variables and how measurable variables are interacting, and we can observe these, and by observation of these measurable variables we can understand how certain things are interacting together, and we can make calculations upon that, and then we can produce a laptop, we can produce an iPhone, we can produce certain technology. So this has its utility, it's very useful. You can produce a microphone so I don't have to yell when I'm talking. So this has a great functionality. But if we look a little deeper, we can see that the predominant scientific narrative is that everything is made of atoms. If you go into quantum physics, you know, break down the atom, and then there's the proton, the neutron, the second electron, and then quarks and all kinds of things. But just for simplicity of discussion, we will say that in science, the predominant belief is that everything is made of some kind of atomic structure, some kind of atom. And eventually, we're going to find what they call the God particle. You know, there's that, I think it's in Sweden, we have that thing that goes around and they're trying to find the God particle, right? Now, so the belief here is that, well, coming back a step, the main scientific narrative is that everything is essentially made of matter. But if you actually ask, what is matter? They can't tell you what it is. So then they have this term, oh, actually 99.98% of matter is dark matter, which is really just a term to describe, well, we don't know what the fuck it is actually, so we'll just give it this name, just pretend like we do. So most of existence, we actually don't know what it is. And this very small percentage, we'll call that an atom. But when you really observe the atom, it zaps in and out of existence. So the fundamental of the hypothesis that everything is made of matter, they can't even tell you what matter is. So actually, this has no foundation. The spectrum of observation has its utility, but they can't tell you what matter is. So we're not against science, but we should recognize its limitations. It has its utility in its field of observation, very nice, but they can't tell you what matter is. So then, for those who are fanatics of scientism, they say all that we can observe in this very narrow bandwidth of matter, everything is in that. And because we have not found God, there is no God. But we know there is different spectrums of light that we cannot observe with the human eye. There are certain frequencies of sound we cannot hear with the human ear. So we can understand through the instruments that we do currently have, there's many aspects of reality that are simply not observable to our senses and even to the technology that we have. So to try to collate all of reality into this very narrow bandwidth of what we can currently observe, it's actually very absurd. And it actually goes against the noble principle of seeking truth. So, coming back to the question, does science actually affirm the existence of a higher power, or does it deny it? So we're not talking about scientism, we're talking about the actual process of science. The result may shock you, because the actual empirical investigation of the scientific methodology, it actually necessitates, it affirms the existence of a higher power. How is that, you may ask? So there is two predominant perspectives here. One, we've already discussed that the base level of matter is what's called an irreducible simplex. Eventually, when we get down to it, we're going to find this a base atom that cannot be further divided. It's not made of parts, because if it was made of parts, then those parts would be the fundamental particle. You understand? Yeah, no?
Yes, but they've broken the atom in half. That means it's in there. Energy.
We'll get to that one next. So first, we're looking at the fundamental particle hypothesis. So one is a fundamental particle somewhere to be found. And then the other one, it's a formless potential. So one is formless, the other one is with form. Now, we can see all throughout creation there is intelligent design. And we can see through the scientific methodology there is a cause and effect. One effect has a cause, that cause has an effect, etc., etc., and we can trace that back. And so, if the fundamental reality is a formless potential, at a certain level of creation, it actualizes into matter, into form, and then that formless potential, it acts upon that matter and guides it to create the certain building blocks of reality in all forms that we see. So therefore, that formless potential, it must be conscious, and it must be omnipresent, and it must be omnipotent. If you say that the fundamental base level of reality is a irreducible simplex, it's an atom, some kind of atom, then because there are laws governing a certain spectrum of reality and how they interact together, that base level of that simplex, it must also be conscious, and that consciousness must also be all pervasive, and it must be omnipotent. So then those terminologies sound a lot like the description of God. So actually the scientific methodology, I'm just touching on this, I could go way more technically into it, but that's a whole nother class, and you might get a little bit lost. But the relevant point here is actual scientific methodology, it necessitates and affirms the existence of an all-pervasive, what the greatest or the most influential Islamic philosopher Ibn Sina, he calls the necessary being. Because if you have one train, you know, maybe some of you have been on a train before, and there's one carriage, another carriage, another carriage. So one carriage is connected to another carriage, and it's connected to another carriage. So this is cause and effect, right? We can see hydrogen makes water and all these sorts of things. So cause and effect, cause and effect. But you can connect many carriages together. But if there's no engine, there's no train, where are you going? Nothing's happening. So, when you trace back this cause and effect, there has to be what's called a final cause. Now, this is the process of what's called natural theology. Natural theology, it proves the existence of a higher being. Now, this is the limits of natural theology. And then what is the nature of that higher being, of that higher power? This is then entering into the subject of what's called revealed theology. because the natural theology deals with the phenomena of the material world, but the supreme power, reality, God, if you want to use that term, is not a product of the material creation. So the investigation of natural theology will never lead to any positive realization of the actual supreme being. It can get you to the threshold of accepting that actually there must be a supreme conscious being. But what is that being's nature? Then we have to enter into revealed theology. So sometimes what happens is certain religious people, they have a debate with a very clever scientist. And then what the scientist may do is they start to attack that person on the level of revealed theology, like the virgin birth or the nature of God and these kinds of things, without first establishing a premise on natural theology that there has to be a higher being. And then when we have that foundation that there absolutely has to be a higher power, then we can calmly look and investigate what is the nature of that higher being, and we can enter into the exploration of revealed theology. But often what happens is someone's just reading from their religious book, they're maybe not so smart, and then the clever scientists, they can cut them down on the revealed theology, and they look like a bit of an idiot. But really, it's just that their faith has not caught up to the level of intellectualization that is necessary on the platform of revealed theology. So, if you actually follow the scientific method of investigation, you will arrive at the doorway. There is a higher power. And whether you believe the ultimate reality is formless or with form. And if you don't, then most likely your field of research is being funded by a certain company that doesn't actually, wants a certain biases or wants a certain outcome. Because many scientists throughout history, in their private life, they have been very religious actually. They have great faith. But in modern day research, because the question comes, we're so clever and we're doing so much investigation, why isn't this in the mainstream media? 6 o'clock news tonight, science affirms there must be a higher power. Why is that not there? We should ask this question. Catch the news tonight. Maybe it'll change. So then what we tend to do is we superimpose our experience here on earth onto that supreme being. Because we have some experience here on earth and we think, okay, a supreme conscious being, so what's my experience here? Okay, he must be like some emperor, some king, sitting on a throne, looking down on everyone, nothing better to do than punish me for eating too much ice cream or something like this. This is a real worldly superimposition onto the supreme reality, and it's really human-centric and it's really earth-centric. Because right up till the Middle Ages, in certain religious traditions, they thought that the earth was the center of the universe. Because why not, right? We're so great. We're so enamored with ourselves. So what we do is we mix our worldly experience and we project that onto the supreme reality. But like Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, I don't exist in this illusion of your mind. You have to come out of illusion to actually realize what is that supreme reality. So in many traditions we see there is some commonalities of trance induction. In certain shamanic traditions or the like, they may do fasting, they may do vision quests, they may dance around the fire for many days, one may go into meditation, and this is to transcend the limitations of the limited mind-body complex. Because when our consciousness is being filtered through the very limited apparatus of the one the limited senses of the body, or 2, the limited purview of the mind, you'll never be able to understand truth. So, you know, very common today, people are doing all kinds of plant medicines because they're trying to look for some shortcut to get out of their limited mind-body complex and have a higher experience. So, Swami Satyananda Saraswati, he writes in one of his books, if you're walking through a vast forest and you don't know where you are, and you're trying to find your destination, and you come to one very tall tree, and you decide to climb that tree, and then from the top of the tree you can see, oh, there's my destination. And that's a real experience, it's a real trance experience that you're having. But then you have to climb down the tree and you have to walk all the way to your destination to get there. So sometimes these shortcuts, these plant medicines kinds of things, they're like climbing up the tree, and it can be a valid experience, and it can give you an insight beyond the 3D reality that is in your normal waking state. And so it gives you some impetus, oh, there must be more. But ultimately, we have to come to some kind of organic way to walk the path and abide in that level of perception organically. Because it's not sustainable to be on mushrooms every day or whatever it is you think. You can try it if you like, but you know, there's other techniques that are a bit more natural. Anyone have any thoughts or reflections so far? Challenges are welcome.
When you discuss the possibility of, you said about inertia, waking up, feeling tired, the other energies rising, how to elevate yourself to the higher way of action with fire. Discuss that. I'm looking for a method. Rather than stories of existence.
You're looking for a method of how to...
Wake up more naturally, have more energy, raise your energies.
Okay, nice
From that
question.
perspective,
Practical.
experiential.
So, you know, in Ayurveda, it's understood, actually in many cultures, but we'll use an Ayurvedic example, that there's different body types and there's different elements that are present that are more prominent in different times of the day. So, in the early morning, in the Brahma Muhurta, 1 hour 36 minutes before the sun rises, all those 3 energies, they are at equilibrium. So no matter what is your spiritual orientation, you should try to do your practice 1 hour 36 minutes before the sun rises for that duration. It's known as the Brahma Muhurta, a very auspicious time. And you'll be able to go a lot deeper into your practice.
Sorry, that's interesting because I found waking up at 6, 7, I don't want to get up. Unless I have to full time for work, and I do. But sometimes I've had less sleep and woke up at 3, 4 a.m. And I felt energized like I wasn't asleep and tired. And
Yeah,
it feels
but-
like it's because of this.
It's a bit, I think it's about every 3 hours.
They said 3:30 a.m.
Well, it depends on where you are in the world and when the sun's actually rising. But 1 hour 36 minutes. And so like 3:34, that's a good time to get up if you can.
So now I know I can try to get up earlier to stay in that state and being tired to go to bed.
Because about every 3 hours, a different element becomes prominent in nature. So early in the morning, the element of Vata, air, is more prominent. So one feels lighter. It's easier to get up. And then after that, the elements change, and the element of fire, if I remember correctly, starts to become more prominent. You know, as the sun's coming, more fire in the atmosphere, and then the mind's becoming more busy. What am I going to do? What am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for breakfast? The mind starts getting more active, and so it's more distracting for your meditation. And then after another 3 hours, then the element of water and earth, and then this comes around again. And then so you should try to also take rest before 10 p.m. because at 10 p.m. the element of fire again has its turn. So then you get a second wind, and like before 10 you're feeling a bit sleepy, and then tonight when the music's going 10 p.m. you'll be energized because the element of, and then you can't sleep, and then next thing you know you're going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and you're waking up at 11, and So, you know,
Sorry, is there a time frame that you know when these elements are every 3 hours? It's 3 to 6, fire, 6 to... Yeah, exactly. 3:30 to 6, that's right. Is it air or you know the elements? Which time frame?
I made one chart. It's in the bookshop there. It's got a lot of information on it. You can take one of those if you like. So, also in those elements, those gunas, food, activities, all these things are loaded with this energy. So when we're engaging in these certain foodstuffs, pastimes, then our consciousness is also taking on that energetic state, and it perpetuates this particular kind of energy that it has. So, you know, if you're eating a lot of fried food, a lot of fast food, a lot of frozen food, then you probably end up spending a lot of time on the couch and you're playing video games and you're just stuck in this tamagoon. Or if you're eating a lot of chili, if you're eating a lot of salt, if you're eating a lot of sweet, this is Roshagun, and the mind's going everywhere, and next time you want more spicy, more chili, and the mind can't concentrate. And eating simple foods, natural from the garden, cook them simply, eat fresh, this is Sattva-gun, and it brings about clarity, it brings about peacefulness. Also routine brings about peacefulness, because the body becomes habituated. Eating meals at a certain time, the body knows when to receive the food, and then the internal agni, the internal fire, will align itself and it can digest properly. But when we're waking up at 11 one time and 3 a.m. another time, and the body doesn't know what the hell's going on. And then also, eating simply is very important, because you should also eat with your fingers. Because as soon as your fingers touch the food, each finger is related to a different element. And as soon as your fingers touch the food, particular digestive juices in the stomach start to get released, so you can assimilate that particular food that you're receiving. When you're taking it through the spoon, the body doesn't know what the hell's going on, it doesn't know if the temperature's okay. And then one's having, you know, people really like smoothies, right? But actually from an Ayurvedic point of view, you've got 10 million different things in the smoothie, and the tongue doesn't know what the hell's it's receiving. So how can it actually receive it properly? So try to be simple. Simple is good, but we like to be very, very complicated. And so, you know, if you go and stay at any monastery, any ashram, anything like that, they have routine. Even your grandparents, they had some routine, and it was like, oh, they're really boring, you know. But this makes for a peaceful mind. You know, at the end of the Tao Te Ching, the Laz Tao, he says something like, and the neighbor's country is so close that you can hear the roosters crowing and the dogs barking, but the people are content with never having gone to visit. So, you know, there's another verse from the Tao Te Ching, you can see the whole world from your windowsill, but you don't even need to go outside. So in very deep states of meditation, you can understand so much of reality. It is far more astonishing than any 3D IMAX film you will see at the cinema. It is just simply someone's vikalpas, their imagination. Reality is astonishing, but we like to stay in our rajasic dream state. So we want to follow a lifestyle that helps to cultivate Sattva-gun, the energy of clarity. So also doing your dharma. Every person is born into a particular circumstance, and they have some particular duties in relation to the position that they find themselves. A mother should look after her children, a father should look after his family, you know, you look after your parents, whatever. You have some duty, whatever you're doing. And so Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, you know, there's a chapter on karma yoga. And the essence of that is do your duties to the best of your abilities, but try to be detached from the fruits. But actually, we are doing our duties and we're thinking, when am I getting my paycheck? Oh, I'm going to get this car, I'm going to get this house. And so the whole time we're doing it, we're just perpetuating our attachment. And the Buddha says, attachment's the cause of suffering. I was just talking yesterday. Anytime that you're suffering, you can take your own pulse and see. It's because you are trying to hold on to a particular point of view. And the stronger you try to hold on, the more you will suffer. And whatever is happening, it's just happening. It's reality.
How do we let go in that moment?
A really good question. Actually, we don't know how to let go.
We say we hold on. We don't know how to hold on. I want an answer. That's not making on. How do I give in, surrender, let go, so peace, without saying that's
It's a very valid question. How do we let go? See, you can't let go. When there's an ego trying to let go, you cannot let go. So this is the thing. It's a process, and we have to cultivate the sattva guna, because that propensity inside us that wants to let go, that is rajasika hankara. That is ego in the mode of rajaguna. So you can see certain spiritual practitioners, and this is natural for many of us on the path. You know, okay, I'm going to give up everything and I'm going to go to the Himalayas, or I'm going to become a monk, and they're so constricted that after some time they give up and they go back to the nightclub, because it's actually one's trying to be sattvic, but they're rajasically sattvic. So
you said cultivate what? Rather than all the things that we're doing wrong. What's the right thing?
So we've given some pointers about the sattva guna lifestyle. That's one thing, right? But ultimately, we need to find a guide. And the guide can give us personal instruction for our personal circumstance. And the guru, he can see inside the core of your heart, and he knows everything about you, even the things that you don't want to admit. And because the guru has x-ray vision and can see, then that guru can guide you with very nice instruction. But we have to understand, since beginningless time, we have been transmigrating from species to species to species, going through this wheel of samsara. And in this endless wheel of samsara, our consciousness has been totally absorbed in our own self. To try to just come out of that in one life, it is a very difficult process. Actually, very few people achieve it. You know, on the eve of the Buddha's enlightenment, when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree, like a movie, about 550 of his past lives all played out in the forefront of his consciousness. And so, in some lives, knowingly or unknowingly, we are putting some credits in our spiritual bank account. And that spiritual bank account, it increases over some lifetimes. Some people, they're just starting off putting the first credit in here at Spirit Quest. Other people, you know, their balance is already pretty good. Your good karma and your bad karma bank account are always going up and down, floating interest rate. But the spiritual bank account, it only increases. So the wise businessman, he invests in his spiritual bank account. Because at the end of your life, all your material possessions, they'll be lost. And all we take with us is our karma. You can't take one gold coin. So, as we traverse this journey and we start to accumulate what's called sukriti, some pious spiritual credits, then finally we can come to the feet of a guide. But actually the ego is still very strong, and most of us don't really want to actually surrender. We don't really want to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. You know, one time there was this is a Sufi story. There was one wealthy businessman, and he was always quite introspective and philosophical throughout his life. And so as he was getting on in years, he decided to sell his business and buy one small house in the middle of the desert, and just take all his books and just read, and I will realize God from my own effort. So he sold up everything. He was quite wealthy. He went out to the desert, bought a house, and then he realized, you know, I actually don't know how to cook for myself because I've always had servants. So then he went back to the village and he hired one servant, and that servant cooked for him. And in the meantime, one man approached a Sufi practitioner and he asked them, "Oh, can you be my guru?" And then that guy thought about it and was like, "Well, I'd have to ask my teacher." And then that man said, "Okay, let's go and ask your teacher if you can teach me." And then that guy said, "Well, the problem is I don't actually know where my teacher is, but I'll try and find him." So then for 7 years, that Sufi guy, he was going around all the desert trying to find his teacher, looking everywhere. And meanwhile, back at the house, that rich businessman, he was reading his books, so many books he was reading. And occasionally he would have conversations with his servant. And his servant was actually quite insightful. And they would have quite deep philosophical conversations about the nature of reality. And then some years went by, 7 years actually. And he read all his books, and then he realized, you know, it's still not clear to me. What is God? What is the truth? Who am I? And then just then, as he was thinking that, there was a knock on the door. And then so the servant, he went and he opened the door. And it was that Sufi man who was looking for his teacher. And then that Sufi man was at the door, and then he realized, oh, and he gave pranams, obeisances, because that servant was his guru. And his guru was playing the role of a servant for 7 years in the house of this businessman. And then he said to his student, "Oh, okay, now you can stay here and you can teach this guy, because it's taken me 7 years to convince him that finally he needs a teacher." So we are like this. Our ego is very, very strong, and it's actually really very rare to meet a soul who's actually willing to surrender. And we have all kinds of concepts of how to surrender and what does it look like. But one of my teachers says it's like, we actually don't know how to surrender. And one of the greatest hindrances on the spiritual path is when you have an ego that tries to surrender. Because ahankara vidut atmarkartaham iti manyate. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, everything is just getting carried out by the modes of material nature. But the bewildered soul, he thinks, I am the doer. I am doing everything. And we were talking yesterday about how we have so many impressions in our consciousness. And Patanjali Rishi in the Yoga Sutras, he has described how a different impression will come in the consciousness. Like you're walking down the street and you walk past the chocolate shop. Oh, chocolate. Suddenly you want chocolate. Is that free will or not? What do you think? Is it?
Choose to eat it or not.
Whether you choose to eat it?
Choice. And you have an excuse. It's okay, I like it, it makes me happy.
So, you walk past the chocolate shop, and then the impression that was dormant in your subconscious comes to tanu, the active part of your consciousness that previously you have enjoyed chocolate, and that is now active, like a light bulb on in the consciousness. And then when the Rajagun is there, tasya hatura vidya, the conjunction is what causes the conjunction is ignorance. So when Tamagun is there with Rajagun, then we unite, our consciousness unites with that active impression, and we think, oh, I want chocolate, I will enjoy so much. And then we just follow that impression, like one donkey is following a carrot, and we think, oh yes, I have so much free will. Oh, I went to the market today and I decided to buy chocolate. I am the master of my own destiny. I am manifesting everything. And then Vikschinna, that impression rotates to the subconscious again, and then another impression comes. Oh, now I'm doing this. I'm going to this workshop. I'm going here. Yes, I'm manifesting everything. Are we really? Yes, we have free will, and you know it's nuanced, so it's not black and white. You know.
You were saying that I got free will because I'm very much like that. Chocolate donuts, and I give in. And our day, I deserve it. Why not? And I can't stop it. Maybe 10 years already. Anything. But what you were saying is, like, free will seems to be when I was doing what I was doing until that moment arose to have the chocolate. And then that became an automated cycle pattern, which is something I have to face, deal with as well, by resisting or overcoming to regain my free will again. Because I'm giving in, and it was not my free will or choice. It's past impression, compulsion.
Yes. Yeah, so that's why.
I know what I can work on.
That's why we were saying that generally speaking we want to cultivate sattva gun because it's in the mode of sattva, in the energy of clarity and stability, that our free will can be actualized. And then we walk past the chocolate shop and we can think, oh, do I really want this chocolate? Is it actually good for me or not? But when Rajagun is there, we don't really have the choice, we just have that compulsion.
Talk about how to cultivate sattva.
So, like I said, the routine, getting up at certain times, the food, also our living location, they are also in the different gunas. So the country, nature, this is the place of sattva gun. And the city, it is the place of rajagun. Because let's look at honestly what a city is. It is a place where you can most easily satisfy your senses 24/7. You can't just go, if you go to Australia to the outback, you have to drive 2 hours to go get a bottle of milk. But in the city, everything's available 24/7. You can go and get your Big Mac at 1 a.m. in the morning, you know?
See, it's interesting. And I feel like chocolate at home. I go to the cupboard, it's not there because I didn't buy it. And it shuts off automatically. I don't want it, I go back to doing something else. But if I know I'm in the city and there's a way to get it, it takes me there.
Yeah.
And I have it no matter what. I can't just say, it's not good for me, I don't want it today, I choose not to. When I find out, something finds out it's not there, it's in Hamilton, it's too far, it stops.
Yeah, because, you know, if you actually spend a fair bit of time in nature, when you drive into the city, you can feel the rajagun. You can just feel that energetic vibration. And, you know, people with their minds so active in the city, they want to go here, they want to go there. It's harder to cultivate. I'm not saying everyone in the city is rajasic, but the atmosphere doesn't lend itself.
So what have you found? How long, if you get a routine that works to cultivate this positive aspect, will these negative thoughts not arise for that compulsion? Or how long does it take for the mind, the body, or energy to change? A week, 3, 2 days?
Unsatisfactorily, we cannot give a prescription because each person's different. And also, ironically, what can happen is when we do try to be too sattvic, there can kind of be an internal revolt. And, you know, sometimes in the ashram, people being all sattvic, getting up 4 o'clock in the morning, doing the routine, but then the energy that builds at a certain point, they have to just go out and buy a chocolate bar. Because we're, particularly for our Western mentality, you know, this is why in the traditional setting in India, the student would come and spend at least 12 years with the guru. Even 12 years before the guru would teach him anything. Now we want to just come along, pay some money and give me the highest mantra. And so it's over that time, then we can become more and more sattvic. And just being in the presence of the spiritual master, we will take on so many qualities, so many behaviors, but so much I've seen an internal revolt can come. Like when you're really engaging in service, selfless service, when you're spending a long time in the ashram, something like that, you have to do some swadhyaya, some introspection, and learn to there's one book like by Yama Leshy called Become Your Own Therapist. And because we have to see what is our energetic mind state and how to manage that. Because sometimes if we're trying to be too sattvic, sometimes it's better to go out and actually have that chocolate bar, but mindfully. The first time I went to India, this is not a prescription, it's just a story. I bought a couple of books, and it was from one brahmachari, one celibate monk, his diary notes, and he's being really honest. And he spent many decades with his teacher, and he had doubts in his teacher, he had doubts in the teaching, really honest sharing going through his journey. And one day, because he's a celibate monk, he was in the ashram and he was having all these lusty thoughts. And then one very senior practitioner was there, so he went up to this practitioner and he was hoping for some good advice, and he shared his heart on having all this rajagun going on, And then that elderly gentleman, he said, you should go out of the ashram and you should fulfill that desire. And then he was shocked. He was like, oh, shouldn't you be telling me to control myself or something like this? And then the elderly man, he said, don't be an idiot, just go and extinguish that fire and then come back to your practice with full concentration. So this is not a prescription, I'm not telling you to do this, but it's pointing to something that we are really in a rajasic situation, and to think we can just jump straight into the sattvic mentality, for most of us it's not realistic. We have to do it step by step. So like here in Krishna consciousness, for example, there's a methodology of how to engage all the senses in a purifying way. So food is a very powerful energy, and so when we're cooking food, we never taste it. We offer the food. And so Krishna, he's the first one to taste the food. And so this helps get over the compulsion of the tongue. And then because the food is offered, it becomes what's called prasadam, spiritualized food, transubstantiated with spiritual energy. And then rather than further entangling you in karmic desire, that spiritualized food, it actually dissolves the subtle body. It actually starts to nullify your karmic attachments. So there's a very practical process to purify our senses by dovetailing everything with some kind of spiritual connection. And depending on our time, place, circumstance, mentality, nature, different particular practices will be more suited to us. So that's why in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has spoken the path of yoga, the path of karma yoga, meditation, practice in action, practice that is predominated by philosophy, for those who are more intellectual, practice that is orientated more by hands-on. It depends on one's nature. So Krishna is very broad-hearted. And then he says at the end of Bhagavad Gita, I've given all of these practices, it's up to you whether you want to follow them or not. So he's not saying believe in this or go to hell or anything like that. He's a real generous guy, And so he's given so many different paths, but it's up to you. Because you eternally have that free will. But we can only actualize that free will when we have sattva guna. But ultimately, we want to become beyond sattva guna, because sattva guna has some contamination with the lower gunas. So we want to reach the platform of what's called Vishuddha Sattva, the platform of transcendence, the transcendental energy, because your soul is actually transcendent to the material energies. But because we are identified with our temporary coverings, the gross physical body and our subtle body, your mind, your intelligence, your emotions, then we are constantly interacting with reality through our coverings. And so we want to come to a practice that first really actually has the potency to situate yourself in your true nature, which is that as eternal soul. And then how to purify our senses so we can be in a tactile relationship with reality and perceive it as a living spiritual being, actually, rather than some dull, inert, material nature. So, I've been blabbling on for a little while. Does anyone have any thoughts or reflections on that? Complaints? So we haven't talked too much about our God, but I'll just put a couple of points here. Oh, here's one nice quote from Saint Teresa of Avila. This poem's called Crazy. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, sometimes you'll see the worst behavior from religious people. Might seem funny that a externally looking religious person might say that, but if there's a very big river, and in the middle of the river, sometimes there's a high point, right, like a little island, and the current's quite soft. And then as you try to come out of the river, you come back towards the bank, and sometimes the current becomes very, very swift, and it can sweep you away. So for those souls who are really sincerely trying to endeavor to come out of the river of illusion, sometimes the current becomes more strong, and just before, it's just like in the morning time, just before the sun rises, it becomes colder. Maybe you noticed that this morning, we were up early, and an hour or so it's warmer, and then just as the light comes, it starts to get colder. So sometimes just, when you're really starting to apply yourself to come out of the river of illusion, then things will really tempt you. Then life will really start to get chaotic, because Maya, illusion, does not want to let you go. Mara came to Buddha when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree. Satan tested Jesus when he was in the desert. So many great saints, Urvashi, the celestial goddess, she comes and tries to break their meditation. So illusion doesn't want to let you go.
The harder it gets, the easier to do the right thing. At times.
At times.
You say,
Sometimes we're just stupid.
pushing through.
Yeah, but we really need the guidance of a teacher, because at the moment our hands are bound, and when your hands are bound behind your back, you cannot untie yourself. Or someone whose hands they are untied, they can come and untie you. They can give you personal instruction, and they can give you the transmission of how to actually cross beyond this material energy, because this material energy is insurmountable. Krishna says, Mama Maya Drutaya, Mama Aviate Bhavyante Taramatan Tarantite. This material energy, you cannot cross it by your own effort. But if you surrender to me, very easily, I can pick you up and take you over the material energy. So God's mercy is everywhere. Just like right now, there's about 74% moisture in the atmosphere. But you cannot take a cup and just drink that water. So, over many lifetimes of spiritual practice, when our spiritual bank account starts to get full, then God's mercy, it condenses into a cloud. And then that cloud rains mercy upon us, and we can become purified and free from illusion. So that personified cloud, that is Guru, the teacher. And when we're really sincere inside, like, I'm sure you've heard the saying, when the disciple is ready, Guru appears. So actually, Guru has nothing better to do than help the souls in illusion. Well, at least while he's here in the material world, it's one aspect of his service. So, God's so merciful, always reaching out to us. God's mercy is pouring down like rain, but alas, alas, we have our umbrellas up, and not a drop is coming. But that's not our fault. That's not God's fault, that's our fault, because we have aversion. The whole reason we are here bound in illusion in the first place is because we have vimukkhata. We have our face turned away from the supreme reality, and we want to put ourselves in the center of reality. We want to put our own ego in the center of reality. So, there was one great saint called Prahlad Maharaj, and he prays, I don't care if I'm born in heaven or hell, all I want is to serve you, Lord. And quite often, this is some interesting considerations around religion, that why do we want to go to heaven? We want to go to heaven for myself. I want to enjoy, I want to sit on the cloud, I want to drink honey wine forever. This is all about me. So in the Vedic conception, heaven is not in the spiritual world. It's a higher karmic planet, and when that karma runs out, then you come back to earth. Because the passport to get to the spiritual world is selflessness. As long as we are still absorbed in our own ego, we can go up somewhat, but you'll come back down here to earth. So God has his own realm, the spiritual world, and he has his own eternal associates, and he is just having fun there. He's actually got his own life, and we're not that important that he just sits there for eternity on a throne looking at us doing another stupid thing. We're not so important, I'm sorry to say. So you can see we have different artwork of Krishna here, and God has many names: Allah, Yahweh, Ram, Narayan. You know, there's one word in the Oxford Dictionary, and the translation is stunning attractiveness which impels devotion. Stunning attractiveness which impels devotion. Anyone know what that word might be? Very close. That word is charisma. Krishna. Sanskrit is the mother language of all languages. So it's a derivative from the word Krishna, because Krish means existence and Na means Ananda. That being in all of existence who is so attractive that if you just have darshan, have one glimpse of him once, it'll impel you by his stunning attractiveness to be devoted to him. That is Krishna. So there's no one more beautiful in all of reality than the beautiful form of the Lord, and that is Krishna. And Krishna, we have an eternal relationship with him. We have no eternal relationship with your temporary body, with his temporary world, but we have an eternal relationship with the very sweet personality of reality. So it is our teleological purpose in this life to bring that relationship from a state of dormancy to the forefront of our consciousness. And then that is the best carrot to follow, is to follow that thought, is to follow that drive. And then what may be an ocean of suffering will turn into an ocean of joy. And perhaps you'll hear certain stories of Krishna. I'll wrap this up very soon. That, you know, Krishna, he's the butter thief. 5,000 years ago, Krishna, the original personality of reality, he came to this world. And he came to one village in India called Vrindavan. And as a young boy, he was very mischievous. He would go around and he would steal butter from different neighboring houses, even though his father had 900,000 cows. You can imagine all the butter you can make with 900,000 cows. But yet, Krishna was sneaking into the houses of other neighbors, stealing their butter, stealing their yogurt. You know, sometimes he would take his friends, and his friends would get down on all fours and they would climb up on the back, because in India they hang the butter pot from a rope from the ceiling so no insects crawl into the clay pot. So Krishna, just being very young, he could not reach. So his friends would have to make so many clever plans to reach up to the butter pot. And then one day, Krishna was stealing butter, and one elderly gopi, one cowherd lady, she came in and caught Krishna stealing butter. And Krishna's very charming, you know. And then she said, Chor, thief, I've caught you. And then Krishna looked with his lotus eyes and his curling locks. Krishna is so attractive, you know, and he was like just an ordinary village boy with just a little belt around his waist, completely naked, kajal around his eyes and twinkling ankle bells. And then he looked at her and he's like, oh, is this not my house? Are you not my mother? And then, because everyone in Vrindavan loves Krishna, her heart melted. And then Krishna smiled and he ran away. And then another time, Krishna was stealing butter. And then a cowherd lady, she caught Krishna. And she said, Chor, I've caught you, thief. And then Krishna says, oh, I was just looking for my pet calf. And he had his hand in the butter pot. And then that elderly gopi, she said, oh, your calf is inside my butter pot, is he? And then Krishna said, yes. And then he pulled out a little marble toy calf. And then that lady smiled and Krishna ran away. So Krishna has very wonderful pastimes. It's far removed from our conception of God just being like some ruler who's just involved in our life and wanting to punish us if we're good or if we're bad, you know. And another time Krishna and his friends, they broke into one house and they were stealing butter and they were stealing yogurt. And in order to get into the house, they opened the stable, so all the calves were running outside, and then that lady had to go and tend to the calves. And they were stealing the butter, and then they looked in one room, and the elderly auntie, she was sleeping in the room. So then, once they'd finished eating all the butter, they took the butter pot and they put it on the bed of that elderly auntie, and they smeared some butter on her face, and then they ran outside and they hid by the window. And then that woman, she came back inside and she saw the trail of butter going into the auntie's room. And then that lady saw the butter all over her face and the empty butter pot, and they got into a big quarrel. And then his friends outside were laughing at the window. In this way, Krishna is very mischievous. And another time, Krishna, he snuck into one house and he was really wanting to relish butter. And then he found the storeroom. It was hidden, but after some time he found the butter. And then he heard the door open and one lady caught his hand. And she said to Krishna, your mother never believes, but I'm telling all the time you're a thief. But she said, oh no, not my son. You know, parents are like this. Oh, not my son, he's very innocent. She's very innocent. So that lady, grabbing Krishna by the hand, she said, now I will take you to your mother and you can be punished. So then Krishna, he was feeling very ashamed of being caught. So then he took the sari, the dress of that lady, and put it over his head. And then being held by the hand, that lady took Krishna to his mother's house, and she knocked on the door to Mother Yashoda's house. And Mother Yashoda, Krishna's mother, God has a mother. Yes, it's the mind can't digest it, but it's true. And so, even though God's eternal. And Mother Yashoda opened the door, and then that lady, Krishna still had the cloth over his head, very ashamed, you know, like a child getting caught in the cookie jar. And then so that lady said, today, red-handed, I've caught your thief of a son. And then, just then, from behind Mother Yashoda, baby Krishna came out of his room, rubbing his eyes like he'd just woken up. And he's like, what's going on? And then both ladies, she looked and they turned and they saw, Krishna's just come out of his room. If that's Krishna, whose hand do I have? And then she took off the cloth, and it was her own son. And then that woman, feeling very ashamed, she begged her pardon and she went away. And then as she was walking away, still holding the hand of that little boy, she looked down and she saw it was Krishna. Because one name of Krishna is Yogeshwara, the master of all mystic powers. He's God. He can create millions and millions of universes without even breaking a sweat. So he can very easily change your form. And then Krishna looked at that woman and she said, don't you go taking me to my mother ever again. And next time, if you try to tell on me, it'll be your husband behind your sari. And then that woman was shocked, and Krishna pulled out his hand and he quickly ran away. So Krishna is very wonderful. There's one chapter in the Bhagavatam called Wonderful Krishna. So Krishna's very sweet. Madhurade Pakilam Akram Madhura. Krishna's name is like an incessant cascade of honey, because there's no difference between Krishna and his name. So beyond our limited human conceptions, when we come out of illusion under the guidance of Sri Guru, then we can come into contact and cultivate our relationship, our loving relationship with the personality of reality. And why is Krishna stealing butter? He doesn't need butter. Another name for Krishna is Atmaram. He's completely self-satisfied. He needs nothing. But there's one thing that God doesn't have, and that's your love. And Krishna's very greedy for your love. So those gopis, every day they are offering their butter on the altar to the Supreme Lord. But they don't know that Supreme Lord is coming in the form of a child and stealing that butter. So when there is love, God will come. So Sri Guru teaches us how to really have love. And when we have love, Krishna will become bound in your heart. Just like in this picture here, Krishna is bound to the grinding mortar. And he was bound by his mother, because his mother has so much love, she can tie God to a grinding mortar with a piece of cloth. There's yogis in the Himalayas for thousands of years doing austerity just to get one glimpse of Krishna, the tips of his toes. There's people praying, there's people doing obeisances, there's people doing all kinds of austerity. But Krishna's mother has so much love, she can tie